He had enormous talent. He knew a lot about the movie business. He was not, as they call it, a suit in Hollywood terms. He was someone who really dug in and into the content and picked good movies and then promoted them well. So Harvey had real talent. And the challenge for me was, I'm writing about a monster. Could I climb out of that monster stereotype and write about his talent and why he was talented? And I tried to do that.
Welcome to On Brand with Donny Deutsch. I am Donny Deutsch, and this is the podcast that's based on the simple premise that everything today and everybody is a brand. Every personality, every cult, I don't even know why I'm saying that, every institution, every athlete, every celebrity, every company, every product, every movement, and every cult is, is a brand. The brand is a set of values, and we do two things here. We do an interview with somebody about their own personal brand. Today is the fantastic author, Ken Auletta. He's got a new biography on Harvey Weinstein out that is just incredible. It's just out. We're going to talk all about Harvey Weinstein and a bunch of other stuff also. But he's a fascinating guy, and we do what we call our brands of the week. And these are the brands that are kind of shaping the zeitgeist, which brands are going up, which brands are going down, and who's driving who we are today. So let's get right to brands of the week. First up, brand down for Elon Musk. Just kind of a jerk. You know, by now you all know that his bid to take on Twitter fell apart. The stock tanked. He left shareholders holding the bag. He was able to sell. A lot of people think it was Josh Wolf, co-founder of Lux Capital, said the entire thing was a clever ruse to sell and liquidate $8.5 billion of Tesla stock with a plausible excuse for doing it. Because obviously when CEOs sell their stock, that stock usually takes a hit, but he had a reason to do it. I just think he's a slime bag overall. You know, this is a guy that I think is a dangerous guy. He's obviously got a huge megaphone, richest or second or third richest, depending on the week or month guy on the planet, and seems to be kind of a real loose cannon. And he's a guy we need to watch. I think he's a very concerning figure, so brand down for him. This is an interesting one. I'm going to give still a brand down for Kamala Harris, which is weird because the poll says, which I don't believe, a Harvard University Center poll said that Harris enjoys a 39% to 37% lead in Ron DeSantis if they ran against each other for president. Now, I can't stand DeSantis, but everything I know about life and business and behavior and people says DeSantis would just blow her away at this point. I just think she's been a real disappointment. I don't know if it's the administration's fault, if it's her fault. She has not been associated with anything important. She had missteps as far as everything with the border. She is just not connected in many ways. She's got a lot of the problems that Hillary Clinton had, just not believable, not genuine. And I just think she's been a disappointment. We're going to call it as it is, even though this poll, which I would bet against any day of the week, says that she would beat DeSantis. But speaking of unpopularity, Biden, obviously a brand down in a new, I think it was the New York Times poll, has him at 33% approval rating. His overall approval rating, if you put all the polls together, is 38%, which is even lower than Trump. But the real brand down, and this is that basically unpopularity is the new norm for presidents. A 40% approval rating, somewhere around there, is where most presidents end up today. And I think that's because of the media. I think it's because of polarizing company. I don't think it's possible except for a rare moment in time. And we go back to when George W. Bush was at a 70%, 76% after 9/11. I mean, I think if we were Ukraine and Zelensky we were taking his poll numbers, they'd be incredibly through the roof. But in normal times, I just think presidential poll numbers are going to always suck. I just think you've got 50% baked in that, because we are so tribal at this point, or 45% baked in against no matter what they're doing. And then the other 10 or 15 or 20% kind of shake and bake. And when everything is just not going right for you, it's going to automatically dip to 40 or below. And things are not going to always be going right for any president. So there you go. Brand down for the life expectancy in the U.S. We've fallen below China. The average life expectancy of Chinese people has risen to almost 78 years old. And in the United States, it's been stuck at 76.6 for the last year or two. Almost a year and a half difference. And that's interesting. The average person would go, oh, there's a bit of quality of life here in Chinese workers work so much harder than American workers, and there's still so much poverty in different parts of China, yet the life expectancy in China. So China's pulling ahead of us in many, many ways, and one of the critical ways is life expectancy. Brand up for antidepressants. This is fascinating. If I asked you, what percentage would you say of American population takes some form of antidepressant, some type of prescription for mental health? 16%. Almost 1 in 5 Americans are taking some type of mental health medicine, and that's a good thing. Almost a quarter of Americans over the age of 18 are now medicated for some type of mental issue. So 1 in 4 over the age of 18. And I'm going to guess as you get older, that number would even grow. Now, is this a function of we are a less healthy state of mental health society? Or is it just these medications are now available? And I think it's more of the latter. I don't think that there's any more or less mental health in this country than there was 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago. I think it's just much more publicized, and I think there are medications for it now. So I think that's a good thing. And I said, yeah, brand up for antidepressants. Brand down for the news media. It hits an historic low. This is amazing. And Republicans trust it a lot less than Democrats, no surprise. But just 5% of, this is a Gallup poll, 5% of Republicans said that a great deal or quite a lot of confidence in newspapers compared to 35% for Democrats. And only 8% of Republicans said they had a great deal or quite a great confidence in TV news compared to 20% of Democrats. So Republicans, it's 5 and 8% for TV and newspaper, actually the other way around. And for Democrats, it's 35 for newspaper, 20 for TV. But the news media and Donald Trump has been a big part of this, obviously, but this was kind of waning as it was. It started during the Bush and Obama administrations, but news just in an all-time low in for credibility. And that's a problem with all the important things that are happening in the news now, particularly the January 6th hearings. Amazing stat with the January 6th, very, very sobering. And this was a Monmouth poll that a year ago, I'm just diverting for a second, a year ago, 63% of Republicans thought what they saw on January 6th was a riot. And now, a year later, after watching all that footage, 46% only think it's a riot, and now 63% think it's a protest. So it's actually reversed. More people think it's a legal protest than it was a riot than they did a year ago. That's the Republicans. So that's how much the people trust news, and that's a problem there. Brand down for Dallas Cowboys. I can't stand the Cowboys, and I don't like Jerry Jones. They've got a partnership with a coffee company now. The coffee company is Black Rifle Coffee. They have AK Espresso, Murdered Out, and Silencer Smooth Coffee. Talk about tone deaf. Come on, Cowboys. You're worth $6 billion as a franchise. Do you need to get in bed with a coffee company that uses guns and rifles and murder as part of their branding? Fuck you. Come on, get with it. Brand up for the Las Vegas Raiders. They hired Sandra Douglas Morgan as the team's president, the first black female president in NFL history. The Raiders, which always have kind of like a renegade, sometimes an outlaw personality, but they make a lot of strides. So we got to give them the credit here. Brand up for Stranger Things. I've not watched it on Netflix, but you got to listen to this one. The Stranger Things is the latest season has pushed the total viewership of the series to more than 1.15 billion hours of streaming. Think about that. Over 1 billion hours of streaming on one show. It's also hit number 1 on Netflix top 10 lists in 91 countries. I would love people to write me and tell me what it is about this show. I tried to watch it. I couldn't get into it, but it is, it's certainly a thing, as they say. Brand up for the Carters. Jimmy and Rosalind Carter just celebrated their 76th wedding anniversary. That's amazing. I take a guess at how many couples make it to 50 years plus. Only 6%. And they're at 76 years, so I don't even think that's on the charts. But there you go. It's going to be interesting to see how history views Jimmy Carter. You know, he's not seen to have a successful presidency. He got trounced by Reagan. In his tenure, it seems like we're heading in that direction now. You had spiking gas prices. You had runaway inflation. You had runaway interest rates, a terrible economy. You had the Iran hostage crisis. He's been very, very, very charitable and altruistic in his post-presidency, and we'll see how history treats him. Brand down for American Airlines. What they did was inexcusable, according to a Georgia mom. They lost somebody's kid for a while. A mother is speaking out after American Airlines let her daughter to wander alone in Miami airport after flight. She booked her 12-year-old daughter on a flight from Chattanooga to Miami, and you're supposed to obviously get chaperoned. and went with somebody under the age of 12. American Airlines requires children aged 5 to 14 traveling alone to use an unaccompanied minor service, which the parents paid $150 for, but somehow they let this kid get off the plane on her own, wander around. She used FaceTime with her father to help her navigate the airport. But American Airlines, you can't lose people's children. Come on. Brand up for weed, specifically holiday weed. July 4th weed sales hit a record high. They sold the real standout the Friday before the 4th of July, sold 106 million in sales, a 19 leap from the same day last year. July 1 now ranks as the second best day in 2022, trailing only April 20th is Weed Day, which is a combination of Black Friday and Amazon Prime Day for weed sales. Brand up, I love this one, for Kellogg and Nickelodeon, creating new Kellogg's Apple Jacks slime cereal. Now, this gets a brand up because I just am a big Apple Jacks guy. I love Apple Jacks. And they created a cereal, and in the cereal, Apple Jacks they've got, I think they're green and orange Apple Jacks, the actual little Apple Jacks, little loops. Yes, but they have a sprinkler now. When you pour milk in, the milk turns green, like a Nickelodeon slime green. So you get to eat your Apple Jacks in green milk. So I'm going to do this immediately. Okay. What's the most popular U.S. vacation spot? Smyrna, I think it's pronounced Smyrna, S-M-Y-R-N-A, Smyrna Beach. Why? Because they've had three brutal shark attacks in the last year. This is amazing. It's been the shark capital. A popular American beach has been named the shark capital of the world and has already been hit by 3 brutal attacks this year. And now their tourism is through the roof. People want to go visit there. See, to me, call me crazy. If there's a beach where there's been 3 brutal shark attacks in the last year, I'm probably going to stay away from that beach. But what do I know? I don't understand the American consumer today, because what's happening now? More people than ever going to this beach. So there you go. And finally, huge brand up for Tony Sirico and James Kahn. Both passed away this year. Both iconic figures in mob pop culture lore, entertainment lore. James Kahn, of course, played Sonny Corleone in The Godfather. Had other roles, Brian Song, Misery, The Gambler, but really known as one of the great characters of all time, Sonny Corleone, who meets an unfortunate demise at the toll booth. We all know that scene all too well. And Tony Sirico, Paulie Walnuts in The Sopranos, died at age 79. He actually was a former real-life mob guy who started acting in 1974, been on a host of movies, but really became iconic, known as Paulie Walnuts, who was kind of Christopher Moltisanti's partner or adversary in Sopranos, still the best TV show of all time. So we wish their families both well, sending prayers and hugs. And that's it for today's Brands of the Week. Let's now get to our interview with Ken Auletta. If you have any interest in the Harvey Weinstein saga, which is one of the most sordid, disgusting tales of human misuse of power, you will hear it right now. Let's take a listen. That's another sound of another sale. Shopify, the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. Look, I'm going to break it down simple because I'm a marketing guy. If you've got to sell anything online, it's Shopify, and there's not a close second. Shopify is a platform designed for anyone to sell anything anywhere, giving entrepreneurs the resources once reserved for big businesses, customized to their needs with a great-looking online store that brings their idea to life and manages their day-to-day driving of sales. It believes in liberating commerce to all because entrepreneurship has the power to unleash possibilities. Shopify's powers millions of entrepreneurs just like you from first sale to full scale. Every 28 seconds, a small business owner makes their first sale on Shopify. Get started by building and customizing your online store with no coding or design experience. Access powerful tools to help you find customers, drive sales, and manage your day-to-day. With 24/7 support, you're never alone. More than a store, Shopify grows with you. This is possibility powered by Shopify. Go to shopify.com/Donny, all lowercase, for a free 14-day trial and get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. Start selling on Shopify today. Go to shopify.com/Donny right now. Shopify.com/Donny. If you got to sell stuff online, you want to go to Shopify. I am thrilled with today's guest. I think he's the most important media and technology writer of our time. Bestseller, 13 books, most of them national bestsellers. New bestseller just out, Hollywood Ending, Harvey Weinstein, The Culture of Silence. We've got so much to talk about. Ken, welcome to the show. Ken Auletta.
Great to have you.
Great. I'll tell you the most important, doing my research, the thing that struck me out the most, and we have so much to talk about, is that you ran OTB for years, for a few years. What the fuck?
I try and forget that, right.
How did that just doesn't, I'm looking at your resume of everything from, working with Bobby Kennedy to all the books, to all the profiles you've done, to New Yorker, to everything. And I'm like, wait a second. He ran OTB for 3 years. How did that happen?
Well, what happened was that in politics, after getting a graduate degree in political science, I went to work for a guy by the name of Howard Samuels.
Sure, did he run for governor?
He ran for governor. With my help, he lost. I was his campaign manager.
Right.
I don't advertise that as much. He invented baggies. He invented the plastic clothesline. He was an engineer and a really bright guy. He was the first Democrat to support John Lindsay for re-election in '69, going against the Democratic Party, a candidate by the name of Mario Procaccino.
Procaccino, wow. I
remember him from the Bronx?
This is like 68, right?
It was 69.
69, okay, right.
And so after Lindsay got reelected, he asked Samuels, would he start up the first off-track betting company in the United States? And Samuels agreed to do it for $1 a year, and I was his executive director because we were very close. And so we did that for 3 years, and then left for him to run for governor in 1974, and he went from a 20-point lead in the polls to a 20-point defeat in the poll.
With your magic, right? With your magic. So let's get right into the new book, because this Harvey Weinstein, obviously a villain, one of the most compelling characters of our time. I mean, obviously a heinous guy, and we all know. Was the inspiration for the book your original profile? You were frustrated, obviously, it's been well documented that you just could not get the women to go on record, but was kind of a big motivation, okay, I peeled back the layers, I couldn't get them all the way back, and now here we go.
Well, a motivation was in 2002 when I did that 20,000-word profile. I portrayed Harvey as monstrous,
yes,
and
abusive and
abusing people, but could not nail him on sexual predation, which I believe was true, but the woman wouldn't talk. So I had a desire to nail him on that, knowing that he was guilty of it, and maybe you could prevent him from doing it, making more women victims. So I went back at him and without success. And then in 2017, when Ronan Farrow was reporting for NBC, he called me up and did an interview with me. And then he showed me that he actually had broken the case. He had 3 women on camera. He had 5 by name. He had 5 women on camera, shielded, their identity shielded. And he had the audio tape of the Italian model who Harvey had grabbed her breasts. So I said, my God, you've broken the case. But then NBC decided not to run his piece, saying he didn't have the goods. So he called me to commiserate about that. I then put him in touch with the New Yorker, and he went to the New Yorker and wrote, all the information he had at NBC appeared in the New Yorker, and plus some, I'm sure. And he came out a week after the New York Times expose of Harvey in October 2017. So then I said to myself, to answer your question, Donny, is what made Harvey a monster? Why did he do this? How did he use or abuse his power? What was the relationship with the people who knew he was abusing women, or certainly should have known? How did they enable him, and why did they enable him? And was it similar to what we see happening in the Republican Party with Donald Trump today?
Yeah. The parallels are stunning. They really are. Yeah.
And then I was also interested in the relationship between Harvey and his brother Bob, who had been best friends and partners all through life, and in the end, divorced. Yeah. And the brother actually fired Harvey from the Weinstein company. So
you went back. So was there anything in his early years that would kind of give a prognosis that this was coming out? I know about his years in Buffalo as a promoter, but early on, growing up in Flushing, incidents or profiles that would say, this is the beginning of a monster?
Well, he did not date very much. There was no evidence I could find of him abusing women either in junior high school or high school, or the first 3 years he attended the State University of Buffalo. But he was abused verbally by his mother, Miriam. And she would yell so loudly that his friends, they played poker every weekend.
Mhm.
And they always refused to play poker at the Weinstein home because Miriam yelled too much. Harvey, you're too fat. Harvey, stop eating that. Harvey, do this. Harvey, do that. And for them, for teenagers, it was very unsettling. So they refused to do that. So there was clear evidence of that the mother had an influence. And when I asked Bob Weinstein in one of many interviews we did, I said, Bob, what do you see of your father and Harvey? He said, I don't see my father. I see my mother and Harvey. And that doesn't explain his abuse of women, but it does help explain his yelling.
Well, what I don't want to say, because I'm not a psychologist, but just obviously, he's probably brought this incredible anger towards women, that vis-a-vis the way his mother treated him. Once again, it's infinitely more complicated than that, but you could see the seeds there, no question about it.
You could see that, but what I also saw in the reporting I did was that Harvey did not start abusing women, physically abusing them, until he became powerful. Until when he, in the rock promotion business, was called Harvey and Corky Presents. Mm-hmm. That's when he had the first time a real taste of power. And that's the first time he started raping and abusing women. And that continued throughout his movie career.
Once again, let's play psychologist because neither one of us are. So, of course, it'll give no credibility, but let's do it anyway. So the question always that I got at, and I knew Harvey very casually, like most people in the media circles in New York. And I always heard, you knew he was an asshole and you knew he was a screamer and you knew he was all that, you knew he was a womanizer, but nobody knew to the extent, obviously. And the question I would always get asked when all this came out, hey, wait a second. And here's a guy that just being Hollywood guy could get a million women, just because of his position of power without abusing and without even quid pros, just because of who he was. So why the monster? Why the need? What did you find in your reporting and in all of your interviews that says, okay, a guy's in a position to get millions of women, forget whatever their motives are. So why this heinous, monstrous performance?
I think Harvey needs to conquer people. He would do it verbally, he would do it in negotiations, and he would do it with women over sex. And it wasn't enough he didn't have the patience to court them. It was just, Harvey, when he smoked, he was a chain smoker, mm-hmm. He would rip the top of the cigarette pack off just to grab it because he didn't have the patience to open it slowly. And he would just shovel food in his mouth, dripping sometimes the leftovers on his shirt. Harvey had no patience. And I think with women, he had no patience. And I think he wanted something and they were there. And I think in his mind, he probably justified it, that it was a trade. They want something from me, a role in a movie, mm-hmm. an actress career, work in my company. And I want something from them, sex.
Yeah. Also, the big question, which obviously is going to be throughout the book, is how did this go on for so long? People within the circle, there's stories of just, once again, the assistants had to set up, scenarios where they would send women directly to his hotel room. On and on and on. So in not one thought, but in a kind of just a singular train of thought, how did this go on for so long?
It went on for 4 decades. And Harvey was not the first time it ever appeared in the press that Harvey might be a sexual predator was in 2015, when the Italian model came forward and claimed he grabbed her breasts. And the police wired her. She was the first person who ever go to the police against Harvey. Again, not till 2015. Mm-hmm. And they wired her, and she had a tape recording of him doing that. But when the district attorney didn't think he could successfully prosecute Harvey over this, what happened was she received $1 million non-disclosure agreement settlement and issued a statement basically exonerating Harvey of the previous claims she had made against him. So once again, it passed into away, and nothing happened until he was exposed in October of 2017, first in the New York Times, and then a week later by Ronan Farrow in the New Yorker.
What was equally heinous about him was not only his deeds, but the things he would do to cover up his deeds, and the things he would his modus operandus as far as, you know, trying to get goods on his victims, and the lengths he would go to. Talk about some of the extraneous, not extraneous, the extravagant moves and villainous deeds to covering up and you know, going after his victims.
He hired in 2016. He hired a company called Black Cube, and Ronan Farrow reported extensively on what he did. But I, as one of the people, reporters who got a call from someone who pretended to be a journalist, this guy Friedman called me, as he called other people, and said, "Are you working on anything on Harvey? I'm doing a report. I'm a reporter, and what do you know about him? Are you doing stuff?" And in Ronan Farrow's case, he has reported, they actually tailed him. He thinks his phone was tapped by them. These were ex-Mossad agents, many of them. In Rose McGowan's case, the actress who claimed that Harvey raped her, he literally had a woman who befriended her, pretending to be working for a company that wanted her to give a very lucrative speech. And she became Rose McGowan's best friend, and she was a spy. So they would do these things that were quite extraordinary. And Harvey paid a lot of money to have him do it.
Harvey, when he was found guilty, he just in courtroom said, you know, I'm innocent. I don't understand. How could this happen in this country? What's your best guess as he's sitting in prison right now? Does he think he did anything wrong?
I think Harvey's in denial. I think he does not acknowledge. One of the questions I wanted to ask him, in the end, he agreed to answer some of my email questions. Harvey didn't like me from the time.
Well, he didn't like you from the time you wrote that first profile. Right? It was not flattering.
But then he eventually agreed to answer email questions. And one of the questions I asked him that he did not answer, but I thought was really a question I would love to know his answer. Harvey, when you put your head on a pillow after raping, let's say Jessica Mann, or you can name 100 women, and how did you justify it to yourself? How did you feel about that? What did you think? How did you justify it to yourself, what you had done? And he never answered that question. I suspect if he had, he would have said, I don't know what you're talking about. This was a consensual affair. And I think, again, go back to the trading analogy. He wanted something from them. They wanted something from him. And I don't think in his mind, he is a rapist.
Incredible.
Well, if you look at the definition of a sociopath, and I talked to a fair number of professional doctors about Harvey and people like Harvey, and they acknowledge they're not talking about Harvey because they didn't interview him. But there are three key ingredients to a sociopath. One is lack of empathy. Two is lack of guilt. And three is narcissism. Yeah. And Harvey's guilty on all three.
It sounds like somebody was running the country for 4 years. But talk to me about having dove back in the parallels. First of all, before we get in further, you have the greatest Trump anecdote that sums him up, and it's one of the more benign examples of him. But just talk to me about in Madison Square Garden how you kept bumping into him and he kept asking about you. This is it's such a little thing, but it's so stunning and so demonstrative of the sociopathic nature of Trump.
Donald Trump's father used to go to Gargiulo's restaurant in Coney Island for lunch every day with his assistant. And Donald sometimes would come there. My father had a little sporting goods store around the corner, and he lived in Trump Village. My mother and father lived in Trump Village, which was a middle class, working class housing in Coney Island. And Fred Trump and my father would say hi. They didn't know each other. They knew just waving at each other. But Donald, when he would come, he would say to his father would say to him, that guy there, Pat Auletta, is the father of the Daily News columnist, Ken Auletta. And in Coney Island, the Daily News is a big deal.
Sure.
Writing for the New Yorker wasn't a big deal. And so I was a Knick fan. I would go to games, and Donald, I would see him from time to time. And once I saw him, he said, hey, Kenny, I don't know anyone who calls me Kenny. He called me Kenny. And he says, hey, Kenny, how's your pop? I said, he died. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. The next year at a Knick game, I see Donald Trump again. Hey, Kenny, how's your pop? I said, he died. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. The third year, I see Don. He says, Hey, Kenny, how's your pop? I said the same.
So what?
That was not, I mean, he didn't, basically, you're talking about a man who didn't listen.
Right. Not only that, just so what are the other Trump Weinstein parallels? They're just having somebody who just is a citizen of this country and watching Trump, and as a journalist and having now done this incredible deep dive on Weinstein. What are the Trump Weinstein parallels?
A number of things pop into mind. One is surrounded by enablers.
Yeah.
You look at no one reported on Harvey for 4 decades. Look at Donald Trump today, spreading big lies about a fraudulent election, et cetera. And the Republican Party just does nothing to assault him, his lies. And they don't for the same reason that Harvey's people did. They were afraid of him. And I would also argue they lacked character in not coming forward. But that's one similarity. A second similarity is they both lie with impunity. I mean, Harvey, made things up all the time, and sometimes to himself. And I think Donald Trump similarly does the same. Third, they were very convinced that fear was an essential element of power. And they used fear to enhance their power. And not just fear, but also rewards. Harvey had a book publishing arm, talk books. He would give book contracts to journalists and others, Rudy Giuliani, Al Gore's children, that he thought might help him in good stead. He would give campaign contributions, as Donald Trump did when he was a Democrat, to Democrats as well as Republicans. So the similarity of knowing how to use power and also abusing power was very similar. Those are 3 things that pop into mind right away.
What was the one thing in the book? Not the one thing. What is there anything that sticks with you of all the anecdotes and all the stories and all of the abuses of women that jumped out at you from the book or would jump out at a reader and go, "Wow, this is the most frightening thing I've ever seen"?
Oh God, there's so many. I'm trying to calibrate and settle on one. I mean, for instance, the first woman I think he raped, Hope DeMoore, in Buffalo, she came to New York with him. And he said to her, I can only get one room at the Park Lane Hotel. She was his assistant. And he came to do some work and professional work, and she was there to help him. And he's at the Park Lane desk, and turns to her and he says, I can only get one room. She was not alarmed by that because he knew she had a boyfriend, and she knew that he was dating someone at the time. And also, it was very common in colleges to room male and females to room together. So he went to bed on the couch. She went to bed in the bed. And suddenly this heavy-set guy, naked, comes behind her and starts to fondle her and she said, what are you doing? What are you doing? And he says, do you want to alienate me for 20 minutes of your time? And then he proceeded to rape her. And obviously he weighed 150 pounds more than she did. But I said, why didn't you go to the police? She said, all the off-duty cops worked on his concerts. I mean, and all his ads were in the local newspapers. Who would believe me? I would just be some shrill, noisy woman trying to break out and get some publicity for myself. So I just buried it and went along. And then she was fired by him 2 weeks later.
Having, as I said, always seen Harvey around town, one of the physically most unappealing people you would ever meet. Just not a physically attractive. His face had pockmarks. He was very heavy. He was always, even if he was in a suit, it just looked like he had just gone to a sauna in the suit. As you said, and I've eaten with him, and he would just gross eating. There were also discussions about his genitalia, that he had physical impairments there. Talk to me about his physical appearance and how that has kind of informed some of his life.
At the trial, which I attended every day, the criminal trial in New York that found him guilty, several women on the stand described his physical features. And at one point, the district attorney, the prosecutor, handed out to the jury pictures, 5 sets of pictures of Harvey nude. And the jury just, looked away almost. They just passed it. They didn't want to look at it. But what the woman on the stand said is that he was full of blackheads. His back was full of blackheads. Right. They said that he had a prominent scar on his stomach, which he did have. They then said he had no testicles, which I think he does have testicles. I think what happens if you're fat and you sit,
they
it
disappear.
pushes your testicles and your penis below. They said one of them actually said he had a vagina. Again, that's not true. If you have a small penis, which I suspect he had, though I can't confirm that. You sit, and I think what happens is that your penis goes inside, and it looks like you have a slit there when he really didn't. But nevertheless, here's a guy sitting at the defense table, listening to, and they talked about his foul odor, by the way. That was the other thing that witnessed. So here's a guy sitting at the defense table, listening to that. How humiliating is that? I mean, I kept on saying, I always picked a seat in the fourth row where I had a direct line of sight to Harvey's. I could watch him. And I watched him as that was going on. He didn't seem to flinch, which really surprised me.
Wow. What's his day like now?
He's in a wheelchair in a hospital ward at the prison in Los Angeles. He's been transferred from the prison ward at the hospital outside of Buffalo in New York, where he's serving a 23-year sentence. He will go on trial in October in Los Angeles. There are 11 indictments. There are only 5 in New York. We don't know who the 11 women are who are testifying against him yet. But if he's found guilty in Los Angeles, and it's a strong case, it seems to me a little stronger than the case in New York, actually. But if he is found guilty, he will then be remanded back to the prison in Buffalo to fulfill his 23-year sentence. And then he would, if found guilty, would be transferred back to Los Angeles. But he also faces a possible trial in London.
Yeah, Harvey's never going to see the light of day again. That I think we can be sure.
Actually, his lawyer in Donna Rotunno, in the sentence hearing before the judge sentenced him to 23 years, said, "Your Honor, I hope you'll have a more lenient sentence than the 30 years the prosecution is asking for, because I don't believe Mr. Weinstein will live out his term. He has a stent in his heart. He has stenosis, which is why he's in a wheelchair. He has very high blood pressure.
Yeah.
He has severe diabetes. He has high cholesterol, and he's blind in one eye from glaucoma."
Take away the heinous part of him and just focusing on the success part. You've profiled so many people, from Barry Diller to Rupert Murdoch to Reed Hastings to, the list goes on and on. Any parallels that you've seen from all these uber successful people in terms of in their lives, in terms of their makeup?
Well, many of them have talent, and Harvey has talent.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was an interesting challenge for me, I'm writing about a monster who the Coney Island kid in me would have loved to have punched in the nose. And yet I'm also writing about a guy who did these amazing movies. My Left Foot, The Crying Game, Pulp Fiction. I mean, Shakespeare in Love. I mean, all the Academy Awards he won, all the nominations he received, they were not flukes. I mean, Harvey is a really talented guy, and not just a talented marketer. He knew how to read a script and judge whether the script was any good, because he knew if the script wasn't good, the movie wouldn't be good, no matter what director or actors were in it. So he had enormous talent. He knew a lot about the movie business. He was not, as they call it, a suit in Hollywood terms. He was someone who really dug in and into the content and picked good movies and then promoted them well. So Harvey had real talent. And the challenge for me was, I'm writing about a monster. Could I climb out of that monster stereotype and write about his talent and why he was talented? And I tried to do that in the book. It's a biography. You don't want to read a book where someone's just hitting someone over the head again and again and again.
Were there any women in his life that he did not put in the same category as what I'll just call prey for most of the women that he interacted with? Was there any, whether it's an actress or any other women he worked with, that he treated in the way a woman should be treated?
I think his 2 wives
Interesting.
he treated well and was in love with. But I think Harvey couldn't help himself. I think he's a sex addict, and not to mention a sociopath. And I think I think he loved Georgina, his second wife. I think he loved Eve, his first wife. By the way, everything I could report, he was said to be a very good, attentive father. He had 3 daughters from his first wife and 2 a son and a daughter from his second wife. and supposedly was very attentive to him. And his brother Bob, who now hasn't spoken to Harvey in years and won't, said he was a good uncle to his two kids.
Fascinating. So the Me Too movement, we're in, I guess, year 5 of the heightened. Harvey was really the lightning. The irony of this is that he was the lightning rod for a very positive movement. Where do you see that pendulum? It's really interesting in that that it's funny. Jay Leno ended his run. His people don't realize this is, and he said, "Here's what I'm most proud of." And he opened up his curtain on stage, and it showed 200 families that had met at his workplace. And the workplace, I know I've had just beautiful, love affairs in the workplace. It's what I was young, I was single. It's what you're doing with 90% of your waking hours. It's shared passion. And for instance, how is that now playing out as far as a workplace? I know now I approach work when I'm at MSNBC very different. I won't even say to somebody, "Oh, you look great today." I mean, it's just like you really, really. Where do you see this pendulum now as far as how what I'm just going to talk about male-female behavior in the workplace?
There's no question that Me Too has had a very salutary effect on behavior, and it helped reform things that need reforming, and alerted and maybe alarmed men not to behave in ways that they were accustomed to behaving. That's all good. But there's also no question that there's some excesses. And if to see Al Franken and so many other people grouped together with Harvey Weinstein, you see, and I'm sure you see this more than I do. I know any number of male executives I've talked to who say they will not meet alone with a woman in their office. They will not meet unless the door is open.
100%.
So you think about the lost mentoring that takes place.
Very interesting. I know a very, very, very senior woman who, one of the most powerful women in finance in this country, at a bank. And she said the exact same thing. But because her boss, the CEO, will not be on a plane alone with a woman, will not. And she's brought up that exact point from a woman's perspective.
No, it's a worrisome thing. And also, you think of the fact that one of the things that came out of the Me Too movement and feminist argument is that believe women. That was the slogan, believe women. Well, I'm a journalist. You're a journalist. If you say to me, believe the President of the United States, believe everything the mayor or the governor says to you, you would say, I'm a journalist. I don't do that. The right slogan is listen to women, not believe women. Believe women is kind of zealotry. And I think that has to change some as well. In other words, every time someone makes an accusation, that doesn't mean the accusation is correct.
Yeah. It's been tremendously positive, but like with everything, we'll find the slot. Whereas we're listening, and yet there's not a reaction where we're not stifling other things, positive things that happen. I'm just curious. I would take it 10,000 feet up because you're such a smart guy who's been watching the world, who's been watching power, who's been watching the media, who's been watching technology. And I'm a little younger than you, but I'm going to call us both grizzled veterans in the world. I can never remember the world feeling as sober as it does right now. When you put in Roe v. Wade, when you put in guns, when you put in January 6th, when you put in that 70% of this country still thinks, 70% of Republicans still think the election was a lie, that our democracy is truly on the precipice. Give me some hopeful words, or maybe you don't have them. Maybe I'm just curious the Ken Auletta take on the state of the world 2022.
Well, I mean, I have a hard time intellectually challenging your pessimism,
right?
But emotionally, I do challenge it. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to wake up in the morning in a somber mood and convinced that the end of the world is near. So I then search for evidence to prove that maybe the end of the world is not near. I mean, I look I think there's a good chance, for instance, the Republicans will not capture the Senate this year.
I agree.
They probably will capture that. So the idea of having some divided government is a good thing, particularly with the Trump Republican base. There's some evidence, I would argue, that Trump has lost some of his glow.
Without question. Without question.
And therefore, it may be harder.
But Trumpism has not. But Trumpism is not, and that's the scary part.
Trumpism is not. But most anything is better than Trump.
Yes.
Most anything, not everything.
Yeah.
But he's so extreme. So even if a Republican wins in 24, there's a good chance it won't be Donald Trump and a return to his lawlessness.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a positive thing. If you look at the press, I look at the amazing job the press does in reporting the lies and the fraudulent election claims. And that's a very encouraging thing. And I think it's also a very encouraging thing that the January 6th committee, I mean, they're doing an amazing job. And by the way, brilliantly produced, brilliant narrative story.
Really done it. They've done a great job, and no grandstanding. And it is a different level than any other hearing we've ever seen.
And I look forward to my next plate of chicken parmesan.
That's the headline. Is the last one. I saw a scary stat the other day that 70% of Fox viewers think that, forget the insurrection, that they don't blame Donald Trump for it, that it was Antifa and it was left-wing radicals. That's 3 out of their 4 viewers actually think, forget, they've been watching that footage and think those are people in costumes. So if you ran into Rupert Murdoch today and you've profiled him in the past, what would you say to him?
I would say to him that you are doing a very dangerous thing in this country. Fox News has created an alternate set of facts, an alternate universe of facts for your viewers, which means they don't accept what should be universal facts. The election, Biden won the election, the sun is coming up in the morning, whatever. And that is so dangerous. And for you to allow these nighttime, primetime 3 anchors to spew some of the false claims they make, and it's not just them, it's others on Fox News. I mean, that is against what you said you wanted to do by getting into journalism when you were a young man, and I profiled him as a young man. Profiled him recounting that period of time. So he's got a lot to answer for. And I would hope he would think about his grandkids and maybe not his kids, but his grandkids, and say, what do I owe this country that gave me its citizenship when I lied and said I moved here and I wasn't an Australian citizen?
Yeah. I got to ask you about frenemies as an old ad guy, and you interviewed me at Adweek last week, and the premise of the book is that kind of advertising is in a existential crisis. I'm curious, 3 or 4 or 5 years later, but I think the book was 17 or 18. What's your take on the state of advertising today?
I think in some ways it's actually in a better position than it was when I wrote the book 3 or 4 years ago. I mean, you see Netflix now saying they need ads. Right. One of the things we're discovering, and I wrote this in the book at the time, the notion that you can have a subscription model alone, and that people who are overwhelmed with all the cable and other subscriptions they pay can afford the Substacks and the Huffington Post and all these other digital media and cable and Netflix and Disney Plus, et cetera, I think is a pipe dream. So advertising is essential to subsidize media. And we're learning that today. And witness Reed Hastings and Netflix saying, who had always said he would never go to advertising, now saying he has to go to advertising. And increasingly, there are some publications, the New York Times, the Economist, the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, that can raise subscription prices, and they don't have to rely on advertising because they have an affluent readership. But most are not in that category, and they need to turn to advertising. So advertising is getting a bit of a bounce back. I mean, NBC just announced, for instance, that this is one of the best years upfronts they've ever had. Yeah.
The premise of, not the premise, what I'll call the tripod of people make shit, they have shit to sell, and then people watch shit. That thing is never changing, I mean, that somehow the fact that somebody drinks beer and somebody wants to sell beer and then somebody has content, that triangulation will always exist in one form or another. It will keep changing, it will keep moving.
But Donny, I wonder whether you agree with me on the following. Advertising has to change. We are spoiled by Netflix and HBO. Because we're not interrupted by ads when we've watched them. And therefore people increasingly don't want to be interrupted. So the ads have to take a different form.
The ads have to give something back. They either have to be more entertaining, more informative, which always was the case in great advertising, even before any of this recent dilemma, that the best ads always gave something back to the viewer. It wasn't like, here's my product and buy it, and here's why you should buy it. And right. And particularly also now, forgetting even the media landscape, when you put in a up-and-coming audience that has more control and demands more from companies and wants more from companies, all of that will add to a better product. I couldn't agree with you more. Ken Auletta, I really appreciate your time. The book, the new monster book, Hollywood Ending, Harvey Weinstein and the Culture of Silence. Thank goodness you are not silent about anything. Thank you, my friend. Maureen Dowd wrote an extraordinary piece and talked about your impact in all of this. And it really belies how important this book is.
Well, it's probably a almost 4,000 word piece.
Right.
So she talked about the relationship with the brothers and how that's severed. She talked a lot about the enablers, the people who enabled him. She talked about his talent. She talked about she talked about me and how I followed Harvey. Thank you, Donny. Enjoyed talking to you.
All right, you stay healthy, okay?
Got it.
All right, that's it for today's show. I hope you enjoyed our Ken Auletta interview, and I hope you enjoyed our Brands of the Week. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe anywhere you get podcasts. Spotify, Apple, any place else. Remember to rate, review, and or subscribe anywhere you get podcasts. And you can watch our videos on YouTube. Please subscribe there also and leave your comments on YouTube. We hope to see you again next week on On Brand. Have a safe week. Everybody, thanks for watching. If you like it, hit that subscribe button. And we love having you here watching On Brand. And just don't miss any future episodes. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.